Long ago in the lands between, there was a glimmer of hope, of virtue bestowed from a single leaf off of the tree. Balance of life and death, governed by the power of an Elden ring. It was the age of Queen Marika with Radagon, her better half and consort. It was a time when living beings flourished in strong faith under a strong leader, and no one thought that things could go wrong under the supervision of a god. Until one night, when the Black Knife assassins discovered the menace of the Rune of Death and dared to slay one such demigod, the nature of reality was thrown into doubt. The first victim was Godwyn, the firstborn of Marika and the warrior Godfrey. Having witnessed the loss of one of her own, Marika became disillusioned with the greater will, the collection of cosmic entities that precipitated her rise from mere mortal status and minted her into a goddess. Marika took her sorrow out on the Elden ring, shattering it into fragments, which became great runes harboring strength for the Shardbearers. In the immediate aftermath, Radagon tried and failed to restore the ring, and as punishment, both halves of the same coin, Marika and Radagon, were imprisoned inside the Erd Tree, their replacements to be determined through battle. As Godfrey would say, in the days of the past, a crown was warranted with strength. Henceforth, the spawn of the prophets, the warring factions of demigods, quarrel in a bid for the crown, a Game of Thrones that has ravaged the lands between, sowing no order, reaping only chaos and desolation in its wake. Once glorious cityscapes have been ripped apart, their ruins strewn about, their remains overtaken by overgrown monsters and dragons, the very beasts that had warded off long ago by Marika and her chosen few. These senseless battles uprooted the inhabitants. The tarnished are shunned, banished, and discriminated against, having lost the grace of the gods and the Erd Tree, and the gift of eternal life. And so they have been alienated, pushed outward with no direction home. But even the demigods are not sacrosanct, as the wrath of the greater will afflicts even the strongest, with the mightiest of mighty, Radagon, acquiring Scarlet Rot during the battle against the fearless Valkyrie Milenia. These two are siblings, demigods vying to be round and paled with the glorious crown. Having fought to a standstill in Caelid, Milenia introduces the rot to the land, and though wounded in battle, inflicts lasting damage on Radagon, who succumbs to the disease and turns mad, devouring both friend and foe, and in the process losing the respect that he commanded in his former glory. With the lands in disarray and the Scarlet Rot unleashed, slowly engulfing everything it touches like the plague, the beasts return to take control, among them being the fearsome fire giants, the treacherous dragons as old as time itself, and those that live in death. But against it all, a lowly tarnished takes it upon themselves to achieve the impossible. They dare to ascend the throne and become an Elden Lord. But I suspect you knew that well enough already. With the ring shattered, the runes were obtained by the remaining demigods, each possessing a piece of the puzzle, but without a true notion of what the full picture represents or what Marika really wanted. Even Gideon the All-Knowing initially isn't sure what her plan was. The brave Tarnished seeks these ruins in order to restore the ring and ascend the throne. Now let's get something out of the way. If you missed the quest of Corrin, the prophet monk who teaches incantations of the Golden Order, the secret of the statues of Marika that stumps the Goldmask reveals to us that Marika and Radagon are actually one and the same. More on this later. Making up the divine lineage are the offspring of Marika and Radagon, a sort of hermaphrodite being that is both male and female. From the union of Marika and Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and also the first Tarnished, spawned Godwyn the Golden, known as the Prince of Death, and the first demigod to be slain, an incident calling into question the divinity and authority of the Golden Order. Then there was Godric the Grafted, the outcast ruler of Stormvale Castle, who has fused the arms of fallen warriors onto his body in order to intimidate opponents in his quest for power. He has special disdain for the Tarnished, even though his father was one, and was known to be bitterly cruel to his servants until his end. There is also Morgott and Mohg, the Omens. Morgott is the Guardian, the self-proclaimed last king of the Golden Order. He watches the throne, but does not desire to be lord, though, with disdain seeks to defend the tree and the throne from his misbegotten siblings, not thinking them worthy of the power of the ring. Margit is also part of Morgott, sort of a specter sent to spy on you in anticipation of your attempt to take the throne, with Morgott being his original form. Mohg is a blood lord, residing in solitude atop the Eternal City, seeking to bring his own dynasty, Mohgwyn, to eminence. This lineage conflicts with the union of Radagon and Queen of the Full Moon, Rennala, leader of the Carian royal family, master sorceress, and former headmistress of the premier Rhea Lucaria Academy. Together they brought to life Milenia, the warrior who has never known defeat, her twin brother, Milenia, who is cursed to remain stillborn in a cocoon, General Radagon, a mighty warrior known as the Star Scourge, Praetor Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, Patriarch of Mount Gilmore, Volcano Manor, and last but not least, Ranni the Witch, Lunar Princess of the Dark Moon. Each of the demigods and the various NPCs have different motivations for becoming Elden Lord, and some of them outright reject the title completely. Here we will explore in detail all of their stories. The first truly significant character we encounter in Elden Ring is the maiden Melina. In this world, the Tarnished have lost grace, but a few Tarnished are able to see signs of grace and follow them with the guidance of the Maidens of the Fingers themselves, interpreters of the greater will, to guide the Tarnished to find solitude. Melina first tells us that she will be our maiden, but later confesses that she has no association with a set of fingers at all, meaning that she couldn't possibly be following the will of the Order, instead having her own motivations for helping us ascend, which I suspect is to at least simply kill the Elden Beast and end the cycle. Who is Melina, really? Melina is a woman implied to be one of the dead that yet live, and she may be a hollow vessel in the same way that Ranni is contained inside of a doll, also saying that she is burned and bodiless. Another possible hint given by Rennala, really Ranni, is that she was instructed by the former owner of Torrent, the horse introduced to us by Melina, to give us the spirit calling bell. One theory is that she is one of the three sisters, even though two of the sisters, Ranni and Rennala, appear to be the same person. The similarity between Melina and Ranni is that they each share one eye closed, each closed eye being the exact opposite of the others. And upon acquiring the frenzied flame and fulfilling that ending, Melina's eye opens, her scar seal gone, and she vows to seek revenge and give us destined death, which could be a reference to the Glow-Eyed Queen, the former master of the God-Skin Apostles and the Black Flames, original owner of the Death Rune used to slay gods, that was herself slain by Maliketh under the orders of Queen Marika. This parallels with a description of Godfrey, who served Marika until he, quote, had no more foes to conquer, and at that point the light in his eyes faded. And in fact, another detail is that the color of her iris is purple, the same as the beast eye of Maliketh, more on that in detail later. It is possible that Melina acquired the scar seal over her eye, which appears to be a hand with 3 fingers, and the singe on her hands from attempting to obtain the frenzy and later rejecting that path. She tells us during the scene, when you become marked by the flame, no matter the hardships in the world, life deserves to go on, and if you become the Lord of Chaos, she will sever ties with you and hunt you. This statement somewhat conflicts with her monologue during her sacrifice at the Goblet of Fire, where she proclaims that the world needs a new order, one with death indiscriminate. Unless, of course, by this she simply means to allow natural deaths, which appear to be the opposite of Marika's plans, as she was the one who outlawed destined death. Melina tells us early that her goal was given to her by her mother, but she has now abandoned those designs, acting on her own accord. Most likely her goal is to replace the rule of the Greater Will and defeat the Elden Beast, since she never seems to mention repairing the ring itself, although it is a necessary step to becoming Lord. And she doesn't want to completely eradicate things, given the fact that she rejects the Frenzied Flame. But given the multitude of characters with multiple identities in this game, it's also possible she has a connection to Marika, as she does say that she was born inside the tree, and she often quotes Marika while visiting the shrines. It was seen that her sense of purpose is aligned with Marika rejecting the will of the Golden Order upon shattering the ring, and her name starting with M would fit the pattern of children born of Marika. But it's still unclear who Melina actually is and just how contrary is her divergent path from her origins. My personal theory is that she could in fact be related to the Glow-Eyed Queen, given the fact that she has a special eye and she references the destined death, only made possible by the great death rune created by the Glow-Eyed Queen herself. And there is that purple eye that links her and Maliketh, and possibly Hoarah together. In any event, I think Melina's motives remain murky and her seemingly selfless sacrifice might not be as altruistic as it seems. I will elaborate more on this later in the video when I discuss the Frenzied Flame and the Fingers. The Roundtable hold served to put a Tarnished on the throne. Vike was one such Tarnished knight who came close to becoming Elden Lord when, to save the life of his maiden, he sought the Frenzied Flame to spare her, and went mad in the process. The Roundtable hold was once hostile to Tarnished, even going so far as to send assassins to weed them out. But after the Shattering, the two fingers looked to the Tarnished to put someone on the throne. The Roundtable is also not so kind to Master Hewg, who has been imprisoned for a reason rather murky, which I will explain. By his own mutterings, Hewg is indebted to Queen Marika, promising to forge a god-slaying armament for the steed of the Round Table. He grows to be indifferent of his status as a forced laborer, saying, "It makes no difference, the weapons get stronger all the same through my craft." Hewg is one of the best NPCs in the game, and we will really begin to feel for him, especially as he comes to accept Roderika, a daughter figure to him, under his apprenticeship, and an appreciation of our continued patronage even refers to us as his lord in the end. As for his connection to Marika and being imprisoned, when remarking about Roderika's raw, untapped skill, he mentions that she reminds me of someone I knew once, which is almost certainly a reference to Marika herself, as she was skilled with a hammer and shattered the ring effortlessly with said hammer. Probably he is imprisoned for smithing the hammer that broke the ring. He nonetheless remains loyal to Marika in her absence as he is to the Round Table. Even when the Round Table hold is burned and his shackles are free, he refuses to leave, making him one of the only NPCs to stay with us throughout the game. Roderika herself is a visitor from another land who was in some kind of danger and was saved from death by her comrades. In return, they were captured by Godfrey and grafted onto him and the Scion, the first boss of the game, which goes to show the depravity of the world in the aftermath of the ring. It is said that they were put in a sort of spider and became chrysalids. Roderika was a sort of mother figure to these chrysalids, who are later found to have been slaughtered and eaten in Stormvale Castle. This devastates Roderika, who forgets that she has a purpose in life. Rekindling that passion in her and Hewg is one of the game's best quests and really serves to humanize these characters and make the Round Table feel alive. Upon arriving here, Sir Gideon, the leader of the Knights and Refugees of the Round Table, is cold and dismissive of you, but upon slaying Godric and his kin and piling up runes, Gideon comes around, eventually accepting you and championing you to take the throne, resigning to the idea that you fit the bill better than anyone. When you burn the tree that will also consume the hold, he isn't angry, as he views it to be necessary evil to fulfill destiny. Gideon is known as Sir Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing, for his eternal quest to increase his knowledge. He has studied the Golden Order in an attempt to gain as much insight as possible in order to become Elden Lord himself. Each great rune we find supplies more puzzle pieces for Gideon as he puts the picture together slowly. He admits that knowledge is never complete, so he dedicates himself to learning and improving his understanding, uttering an important line that has significance based on the discovery he makes before his final encounter with us. Who's to say we will remain who we are once the fight is finished? The fight itself is unexpected, almost a Gehrman moment. I find it emotional, but fitting, given all we've been through with him. He is not our enemy, but our friend. After defeating all of the Shardbearers and opening the path to the inner sanctum of the Erdtree, Sir Gideon makes a revelation about Marika herself. He commends us for our efforts, only to inform us that we shall not be permitted to take the throne. His reason? It was of Queen Marika's will and high hopes that we suffer unto eternity. As Gideon glimpsed into the will of Queen Marika, he shuddered in fear. At the end that should not be. It's a chilling proposition that a man who devoted himself in his life's work to become an Elden Lord would suddenly reverse course must have meant that he had an honest and good reason. I believe Sir Gideon was a man of honor and principle and was correct in questioning Marika and the Order. He wasn't alone. You meet Brother Corrin, a fellow tarnished and devout worshipper of the Golden Order. The attention to detail is great here. For example, when giving a book of spells to Corrin that is not of the Golden Order lineage, he calls it blasphemy, but agrees to teach it to you anyway in hopes it will be of use putting a tarnished on the throne. In fact, one such book that he calls heresy is actually one of the Two Fingers prayer books. Are the fingers to be trusted? Just as there are two Roundtable holds, one being abandoned in Lindale. There are many sets of fingers, more on this in other plotlines. Corrin tells you that you are special, and that most tarnished have lost the ability to see grace, but for you it is still visible. Later he leaves in search of Goldmask, a man who knows more about the Golden Order than anyone else, in order to be his scribe. Deep into his studies, Goldmask comes across a puzzle. It was thought before that Marika was the only true god, but Radagon's name appears to Goldmask in the writing in the stars, and it perplexes him. We discover on our own that the statues of Marika are playing a trick of perspective on us, that Marika and Radagon were made to be one and the same. This shook the Goldmask to his core. Goldmask stared into the abyss, and didn't like what stared back. Not unlike Sir Gideon, who forgoes his quest for the throne, the Goldmask begins to rethink his obedience to the Golden Order, a move that stuns Corrin in disbelief. He starts to lose his own faith in his master, who he served and questioned, battling a confliction between his religion and his mentor. After the tree is burned, Goldmask is killed, bequeathing the mending rune of perfect order, with a transcript that says that the gods are not fit to rule as they are as troublesome as men. Corrin concludes that the master was delusional as he watches the perfect Erdtree burn. The fingers are lying. When you add up the two smartest people in the world rejecting lifelong subservience to the Elden Ring and the Golden Order, combined with the demigods Morgott and Ranni rejecting the throne, their birthright, you know that something is wrong with the worship of Marika and the Ring. The gods are invalid as the ruler of man, and the Golden Order is not holy. Specifically, I think that the Two Fingers are not telling us the truth. The Two Fingers are not to be trusted. Even our notoriously untrustworthy friend Patches feels the same. He would know a liar. Ranni tells us a clue at our first meeting, as Rennala, that the Tarnished should not obey the Two Fingers. Vare thinks the fingers are delusional, and became corrupted after the destruction of the ring. He claims that the fingers, like many in the land, look down upon the Tarnished and are simply using them as a pawn to do their bidding. The Tarnished were spurned, forsaken by the Two Fingers, and now they ask you to mend their crumbling world? There are apparently multiple sets of fingers, so it would be impossible to trust all of them as reliable narrators. Although Vare himself is a questionable character as he peddles bloody fingers and lurks the halls of Mohg Palace. We know from Gideon that Mohg uses Tarnished to turn them into fingers as his function of Bloodlord, Why Vare would go along with this knowingly is strange, though he does mention the use of maiden and nobles to assist the rituals of creating bloody fingers, and Vike is said to be a bloody finger himself. On the road to burning Melina alive, one of the finger readers says that burning the tree will unbind destined death and destroy the world. Who would put you up to this? Certainly not the fingers. The only fingers that seem to be acting on their own accord are the three fingers, the ones who administer the frenzy. I actually tend to think either Ranni or the frenzied flame endings, and possibly even the Goldmask, are the true outcomes. They want to upend the order and start anew. So that brings us to the rest of the important characters that want to do the same. Fia, the Deathbed Companion. A central aspect of Elden Ring's plot revolves around the woman who gives out free hugs. If this generosity isn't suspicious, then ask D about the dagger that death blighted him in plain sight. D, Hunter of the Dead, tells us in our first meeting with him that someone or something threatens the sanctity of the Golden Order, and this someone was right under his nose all along. This instinct of his puts him on the right track of weeding death, although in this case it is his own death to reap, and pushes us into the service of the beast clergyman. More on this essential story later. Fia introduces herself without a proper name and tells us that a special circumstance brings her to the Roundtable, and that in her former home she was in close contact with a nobleman, but was chased away to the lands between. This, of course, reveals to us a pattern of hers of receiving warmth and vigor from a number of champions, those that had fallen in battle no less. She lay with the remains of an exalted noble to grant him another chance at life, her purpose. She awoke to the guidance of grace, but still wishes to be a deathbed companion, one who gives a second life to the dead, or those who live in death. Sometime later, she tells us to give a cursed dagger to its rightful owner, assuring us that it is in the owner's best interest to receive it back. This would be D, who previously had told us that we should be brothers in arms in exterminating those who live in death. Those who live in death defy the Golden Order and destine death, the forbidden shadow plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation, or in other words, the rune of death governed by Maliketh. More in detail soon. I think that Marika, or the Greater Will and the Erdtree, wanted life to be eternal, but with it suffering, and so she rejected the rune of death, even with the death of Godwyn, which doesn't make her or them sound too responsible. After giving the dagger to D, we find his death-blighted body with Fia standing over him, having retrieved one half of the hallow brand she sought for her ritual. The whole time D had been hunting Fia, unbeknownst to him, he was being hunted by her. The hunter became the hunted, a sinister plan indeed. It's here that Fia makes her bloody escape, asking you to bid farewell to the Roundtable by pronouncing her to them as Fia, the Deathbed Companion. They obviously were oblivious to this, or else things wouldn't have transpired like this. When we meet Fia underground, she explains that she intends to lay with Godwyn to resurrect him, and that the Golden Order is full of dogmatic brutes that wish to deny her and Godwyn their union. I am the guardian of those who live in death, a foul and rotten witch, they say. A finger reader pities Godwyn for not dying a true death. Godwyn was to be the martyr for destined death, which is permadeath. A scion of the Golden Bough sentenced to live in death. To refuse the Erdtree's call to return, to live within death, is sickening. Fia believes that she is doing right by bringing the dead back, in service of the weak and meager. Fia wants Godwyn to be the first of the dead king. Upon giving her the Hallow Brand's other half, she is ready to lay with Godwyn in a dream and produce the mending rune of the Death Prince. This rune says that the Golden Order was created by confining death, so the new order will welcome those who live in death. Upon Godwyn's initial death, 2 demigods were slain, he and Ranni. Though, according to the curse mark of death, Ranni died in body, Godwyn died in soul. The other half of the Hallow Brand was marked with Ranni, which is why you need to recover it at the library with Ranni's Empyrean flesh still lingering. Through the lore of Godwyn, we find that he was once a mighty dragon slayer, and one such dragon whom he defeated in battle became an ally. That dragon's name? Lich Dragon Fortisax, the one from Fia's dream, who we slay in order to free Godwyn once more. Godwyn in death wanted to be brought back, so he sought out Fia, and Fia, looking for noble blood, sought him. Dee's death hits Rogier hard, which leads us to finding Dee's comatose brother and returning his armor, setting him on a path to revenge. When Dee's brother kills Fia in her dream, it cancels the rebirth plan for Godwyn. This is a proper death, O Prince. No more children from her flesh. Should you become Elden Lord and repair the ring using the Rune of Death, it triggers the Age of Duskborn.
I got the living room.
Look back upon us and recall the age of the Duskborn.
Maliketh, the Black Blade.
Also known in his docile form as the Beast Clergyman, which really sounds equally threatening, is the guardian and caretaker of the Rune of Death, referred to us as Destined Death as a proper noun. He is the half-brother of Marika, who was asked by her to slay the one known as the Gloam-Eyed Queen in order to prevent death from spreading across the land. By defeating the Gloam-Eyed Queen, Maliketh also weakened the Art of the Black Flame and brought the Godskin Apostles, that is, God's Skin, creepy but cool, under his control. However, on the night of the plot, Ranni stole the Death Rune, conspiring with the Black Knife Assassins, new men who descended from the Eternal City, which led to the deaths of Ranni and Godwyn. It's Rogier that tells us that the women came from the Eternal City, and various item descriptions confirm that the Eternal City committed blasphemy and was assailed by the natural born of the void, perhaps for punishment. The so-called Newman women were said to be from Marika's land, perhaps implicating Marika in some way, or at least making the target of Godwyn, her first child, less coincidental. But nonetheless, Marika imbues the remaining Rune of Death into Maliketh's hand so that the rune can never be stolen from him again. Midway through Maliketh's fight, this is shown to us as he calls upon the true power of the Death Rune to try and stop us, putting all of his cards to the center of the table. This is the reason that he has an appetite for Deathroot, as they have been growing from the base of the Erd Tree ever since the rune was used to slay demigods. He actually consumes these and is never sated because he is trying to ward off death from the land, and not being sated is owed in part to his personal guilt for allowing the rune to be taken. If you complete his quest by feeding him all 9 Deathroots, you get a softer side of him that thanks you for the hard labor, saying that he has done all that he can in the land, which is the last that we see of him in the lands between, as we next find him in Far Amazla, said to be the original royal capital as old as time itself. The reason we got transported here was to find Maliketh and obtain the rune in order to be effective in slaying the greater will, as they are full gods, making the murder of Maliketh inevitable. In battle, Maliketh vows to not let the death rune be stolen from him again. If you enter having given him the 9 Deathroots, he will recognize you and express surprise for you encroaching upon him, and remorse for having to fight you off. But he is still determined to not let the death rune slip again. Likewise, upon slaying him, there are 2 different versions of concession speech. For being his companion, he will mention Marika, asking for forgiveness that the Golden Order will not be restored. I suppose this is just his way of saying that the rune has fallen into the wrong hands. But in some way, perhaps it actually suits Marika's original plan, because he will end up using it to slay the greater will. The regular version of his own destined death shows Maliketh being clueless as to who you would want to kill using the rune. Instead of doing his quest, if you kill him in clergyman form, he asks why Marika gold him. Why did she shatter the ring? Ultimately, knowing he was a loyal servant tasked with a terrible burden, combines with his incredible, imposing design, and makes him a compelling antagonist/boss, almost a sort of gentle beast. And the reality of having to put him down is even sadder, especially sad if you did the aforementioned service of finding the death roots for him. Though you are tarnished, he looks at you almost like a friend. One last thing to note is in the description of the Beast Eye, only acquired by killing him in the Sanctum. I stated previously discussing Melina that the violet iris of the Beast Eye is similar in color to that of Melina when she awakens after you become Lord of Chaos. This again ties Melina back to the Death Rune in some way, and perhaps she really is of Marika's lineage, or maybe it's just a coincidence by aesthetic and not a thematic clue. I think in a story this complex, few details are given without meaning. Morgott. Morgott was once an omen that saw how distorted Mohg had become and gave up on his rituals to become the Lord of Lindell and watch the throne. He calls out all of his siblings by name and with contempt, dismissing them all as unworthy traitors. Of course, he calls us the Tarnished unworthy as well. But he does reveal to us upon his defeat that he too once tried and failed to become Lord, viewing it as an impossible task as no one should become Lord. Godfrey. Godfrey was a great warrior, a sort of George Washington figure, who united the people of the lands between, only to be removed from grace by Marika after he had outlived his usefulness. He was so admired that even the great Radagon, not of his direct bloodline, took inspiration from him and studied his techniques on the battlefield, as did his own son Godric, who has the lion on his axe. Godfrey defeated the last true adversary in battle when he lost the luster in his eyes, which was taken as a sign of weakness. He was stripped of his command and his status as Elden Lord, exiled from the lands between, and forced to walk as a tarnished who vowed to return to bring glory back to his people during the Long March, a time when tarnished were exiled in droves. He says that a crown is warranted with strength, referencing that all great leaders of his day fought for what they believed in and earned their titles by proving themselves in battle, not by the way the Order selects them. He is one of the few characters to accept the protagonist as a lord, perhaps because they too have origins as a tarnished. Queen of the Full Moon, Rennala, was a mere mortal who was once a stargazer, but a very adept sorceress that continued the lineage of the royal Carian bloodline, a powerful family of nobles and magicians that reigned for centuries in the lands between, practicing powerful glintstone sorceries and astrology. These teachings would be passed down to her offspring, such as Radagon, the Star Scourge, controller of gravity, and Ranni the Witch, lunar princess of the Dark Moon. Radagon was her first husband, and their union was well received, according to Muriel at the Church of Owls. It united the House of Erdtree and the Moon. They had many demigod children, and it was under the tutelage of Rennala that Radagon became an accomplished sorcerer himself, as he was also a practitioner of incantations under Marika. Muriel here mentions that there isn't a problem by learning the text of banned books, because heresy is a contrivance, perhaps as the holy Erdtree and dark sorceries were once conjoined. Eventually, Radagon departs from Rennala, going back to the Erdtree to be united with as Marika, breaking her heart in the process and rendering her unable to continue leading the academy. According to Muriel, it is a mystery why Radagon left Rennala, as well as why a mere champion such as Godfrey would be Lord in the first place. Of course, we know that Radagon's secret is that he was in fact Marika all along. Radagon left her with an unborn child and left her in an empty, catatonic state of mind. She was locked away in the library of the school by her apprentices, where she attempts to give life to sweetings due to being left with an unborn child by Radagon. Interestingly, when we fight her in the boss fight of the second phase, it is a specter of Ranni summoned to take control of Rennala during her fight, as it seems that she is still unable to be of the mindset to fight herself. This led to the likes of Selen conjuring the most wicked, primeval, current glintstone sorceries, performing spells so sinister that even the darkest of magicians refused to endorse them. She was banished herself from Raya Lucaria, shunned by her apprentices, her real body being imprisoned in Witchbane ruins, as well as a doll being made for her in Seluvis's basement so that she could escape further capture. Selin informs of Radagon's stranglehold over the stars, using the gravitational powers he learned as a descendant of the Carians. He holds their fate in his hands, impeding the progress of Princess Ranni in her plan to bring about the full moon age. Ranni the Witch, alias Rennala, was an Empyrean born to Queen Rennala in Radagon. She studied the sorceries of the moon under her mother, and was an apprentice to a witch in the woods that taught her about the dark side of the moon. At one point in time, she was chosen, along with Milenia and Miquella, by a set of fingers to be the next in line for Queen Marika's throne. But sensing something immoral about the fingers and the hypocrisy of the Golden Order, she sought to perform an exorcism of her soul from her human flesh. To this end, she initiated the theft of the Rune of Death, which led to the Shattering and a war among the demigods. In her current state, she occupies a doll to house her soul, crafted by sorcerer Seluvis, a puppeteer formerly an instructor at Raya Lucaria. She controls the body with autonomy, but it is merely a projection, almost an apparition, with her real soul being trapped in a miniature doll underground in Noxella, the Eternal City. Her plan is to murder the two fingers using a Finger Slayer blade to evade their capture and, using the Dark Moon Ring, bring about the Age of the Stars, a rule under the moon governed by the natural order and movement of the cosmos. Free from the authoritarian guidance of the Erdtree and the Greater Will, Ranni's Dark Moon is not evil, but one that seeks to free humanity and restore autonomy to all, separate from the gods, similar to the wish of the Goldmask. It will be cold because there won't be certain guidance of a divine presence or the blessing of the Erdtree, but the people would be free. By putting the Dark Moon Ring on her finger, you basically become her husband, her consort, so that she may rule as queen, similar to Marika in principle, but different in practice. Ranni cast aside her great rune, as well as her Empyrean flesh, in order to escape the pull of the fingers. In the way of her plan are the two fingers, which I've said repeatedly cannot be trusted, as well as Seluvis the conspirator and the possession of Blide by the two fingers. Blide, her wolf companion, her wolfman, was designed by the fingers to look after Ranni and her aid, but when she betrayed them, he was ordered to execute her. Blide was in fact programmed to do so as a sort of failsafe in the case of her denial, but he refused out of affection for Ranni, and so battles the impulse to kill with the desire to serve to the very end. This is why we need to kill his shadow in Einzel to suppress his instinct to kill. During the end of her quest, he succumbs to his beasthood, but not before allowing Ranni safe passage to Moonlight Altar, and just in time to become a beast and slaughter Ranni's would-be assassins. Familiar faces, the Black Knives from the Eternal City. There's also E.G., the War Counselor, a wise giant who smiths as well as anyone in the land, devoted to Ranni and the Carian family. When Ranni's quest is finished, it seems that E.G. either disappears or falls prey to the assassins that were meant for Ranni. As for Seluvis, he serves Ranni due to her heritage as the princess of the royal family, but he secretly devises a plan to store her soul in one of his puppets to harness the power of a demigod for himself. It's a twisted experiment, but not one that he hasn't conducted before, on subjects such as Selin, and, if you go along with his quests, Nefeli Lu and the Dung Eater. Regarding Nefeli, she must be of significance to him if he would waste a potion on her, perhaps because of her ties to Horlu and her potential power. We don't have enough to know about her yet. Seluvis is a pompous individual who only interests himself in personal gain, and like most other NPCs, has little respect for you as a provincial tarnished that will drag them all down with him. He hints that he isn't fond of serving Ranni, as it is their mutual misfortune. If you should try to go along with his plans, particularly in the case of stealing Ranni's soul, Ranni and E.G. will find out about it and preemptively kill Seluvis for treason. In fact, in either scenario of their quest, Seluvis will be found dead along with Blide, but the reason is always for betraying Ranni.
I am Milenia, Blade of Miquella.
Milenia, Blade of Miquella. is a legendary Valkyrie, daughter of Radagon and Rennala, and the warrior who was never known defeat. She is consumed by Scarlet Rot, her most worthwhile adversary and constant foe. The same cruel fate followed her kin, Millicent, the girl you can save from Rot using the unalloyed gold needle in Gowry's questline. Millicent vows to return to Milenia, her sense of self, the self-worth that enabled her to resist the Rot, something she lost in order to meet Radagon's measure, referring to her battle with Radagon during the Great War. Specifically, this implies that Milenia, fighting a losing battle in war of attrition, called upon the Rot to slow Radagon down, in the process losing her honor as a warrior, but maintaining her technical status of an unbeaten warrior. There's also another important clue as to how the war began and why it got so bitter. I will discuss this further in a moment when I talk about the Haligtree. Following Millicent's questline, we learn that she shares a sisterhood with other girls who had been born in Rot, those that had turned against her, probably out of sheer insanity or coveting her prosthesis. Millicent was gifted, according to Gowry, but afflicted with Scarlet Rot. She is missing an arm, which she restores with the prosthesis taken from the fort guarded by the Briar that seems to have some connection with Milenia, perhaps her former lover, given the portrait of her on the wall. Millicent is certainly the daughter of Milenia, as Gowry points out that she has the ability to be a great warrior like her mother. Interesting with Gowry is that killing him reveals his form to be one of the disgusting rot bugs that roams the land, saying there are many pests to choose from. If you kill him, Millicent will return to him to find that he is gone, forgetful of the man she should be grateful to because you killed him. It's a sad alternative to this part of the quest with interesting continuity. According to legend, Milenia is close to her third bloom, upon which she would become a full god, fully overtaken by the Rot itself. She stays close by to the Haligtree, guarding it as much as she is dependent on it, for it was the creation of Miquella to stave off her disease. Milenia is probably the best boss in the game, not just for her fight, but because of the story, and Millicent's questline is very sad, as in the end she succumbs to the Rot, not wanting to live any longer under the cruel fate of it, sacrificing herself that she can give the needle to Milenia, so maybe she can be cured of the disease. We save her time and time again, only for her fate to find her once more. After killing Milenia, we trade the unalloyed needle to get Miquella's needle, which itself was unable to cure the Rot, but able to stop the frenzy, his resistance to the other god's will. Miquella's Haligtree is a giant tree north of the Erdtree. It was designed by Miquella using his knowledge and the power of his blood in order to challenge the authority of the Erdtree and in an attempt to cure Milenia's Scarlet Rot. But it failed to grow into a tree as strong as the Erdtree, as the Great Tree. It is also the safe haven sought by the tribe known as the Albinaurics. The remaining known survivors help guide you there, with Albus giving you one half of the medallion and the other half being guarded at Fort Sol. The ghost NPCs refer to the divine Haligtree not working because of the failure of the eclipse and the sun, Sol, not being swallowed. Probably because of the Star Scourge interfering with movement of solar bodies, another example of the demigods getting in each other's ways. This is probably what led to Milenia battling Radagon in the first place. To free the stars from the control of Radagon, his obstinate refusal to relinquish control that holds back the growth of the tree. This further explains why Milenia would have given Radagon the Rot, so that he too could know suffering, the suffering that he denied her a cure from. It would seem that, besides Radagon, most of the members of the Carians supported Milenia, with the Royal Knight Loretta leaving the service of Rhea Lucaria to side with the Albinaurics, and serving as guardian of the Haligtree. According to Miquella's needle, it is incomplete, only to be activated in Farum Azula, the land beyond time where the first Elden Lord dragon Placidex reigns. During the Wars of the Shattering, Milenia was struck down in battle by Radagon, but saved by one of the Clean Rot Knights, who gave her safe passage back to the Haligtree. I theorize that it was during this time that Miquella was stolen by Mohg, as there's no way the blade of Miquella would have ever allowed her defenseless brother to be captured if she was present to defend him. The Eternal City, was once a paradise, but the actions of Mohg and the Black Knight assassins led to its downfall when it was assailed by Estelle, natural-born of the Void. Rogier hints that the assassins that carried out the plot were scions of the Eternal City, which alludes to the blasphemy carried out there and why Mohg is an outcast residing in seclusion as the Omen King, with Morgott having renounced the ritual of blood in Leyndell. This is also the reason we return here for Ranni's quest to find her doll housing her soul and to slay Shadow Blight and acquire the Fingerslayer blade. Mohg had similar plans as he stole Miquella from the Haligtree in order to use his blood to become a more powerful god and bring about his own dynasty. But just as Miquella's blood failed to sprout an effective Haligtree, its purpose to cure Milenia's rot, the blood failed Mohg, so much for being a bloodlord. A finger reader tells us that Miquella's favor can be ours if we slaughter him, but it was all for naught. We should snatch it from the big pot. I have no idea what this means yet. Alexander, the bodies inside him, let us know if you know. Vare outlines Mohg's plans, telling us that Mohg is slumbering and is not ready for us yet. That's why he emerges from Miquella. Mohg stole Miquella in his cocoon form to use the magic of his blood to bring forth the Mohgwyn dynasty, interestingly named as it resembles the suffix of his brother Godwyn, which maybe supports my theory of Mohg being the mastermind. We know that Mohg isn't against murdering his next of kin in order to satisfy his blood rituals. And even Sir Gideon didn't know the whereabouts of Miquella until being presented with Mohg's room. So, I think he set in motion the plan to kill Godwyn to begin the Shattering so that he could get his hands on Miquella, hence the treason of Eternal City. The Albinaurics. Lieutenant Wolf Lobo might have been killed by Sir Gideon, as the tip she gives us is that it was an all-Herian brute. But it doesn't quite fit Gideon's nature. Rather, I suspect it was Ensha, who never says a word but can certainly hear orders. When you find both halves of the medallion, Gideon congratulates you and name-drops Ensha and how he failed his task, yet you succeeded. And after you acquire the first half, you fight him anyway in Roundtable Hold, killing him directly after you teleport there. Nefeli Lu, warrior, the adopted daughter of Gideon, most likely blood of Horalu, warrior, as they share a name, tells us that Gideon sent his men to bring about a tragedy, lamenting that he promised upon becoming Elden Lord to look after the weak always. This criticism of him leads her to being banished, where we find her angry at the Albinaurics. Nefeli serves Gideon and acts as a spy for him, going around collecting information in order to help him acquire greater knowledge. She says as much that her goal is to do what she can to help him ascend the throne. She tells us that this was an act of betrayal to Gideon, but that she still trusts in Gideon's guidance. Gideon references guidance as one of his duties, never ending, but wonders if he will maintain the same positions when fighting's over. Alexander the Great Warrior Jar is a proud and honorable fighter that lives to feel the sting of battle and continues a long tradition of durable warrior jars carrying the bodies of the fallen inside him, giving him increased strength and robustness. He walks a path across the lands to strengthen himself in the harshest of conditions, finding himself in precarious and inescapable situations along the way. He really says the volcano is lukewarm. The guy is hilarious. Eager to accept the toughest of challenges, you meet him at the Festival of Radagon, a great battle where many brave warriors try to defeat the Shardbearer to earn acclaim. Notice the cracks in his armor that grow in size after each battle he partakes in. He laments his cowardice in the fight against Radagon, but vows to grow stronger. Fighting alongside you, he admires your courage and ability, finding himself inferior to you. Nonetheless, he is there to save the day against the fire giant, showing that he is truly worthy of being called Warrior Jar. In his end, he wants to try to prove himself once more, knowing he will find defeat to us. In a seemingly unrelated storyline involving Volcano Manor, but it is nonetheless intriguing as the location of some of the weirdest events in the game. It's here that Patches makes his return to guide us astray and eventually to the manor, where we would join the cult. Praetor Rykard, vastly ambitious, is considered to have committed blasphemy by allowing himself to be eaten by a serpent so that he could grow larger and devour more souls to be immortal. Ranni gives Rykard a part of the blasphemous claw to stop a potential assault from Maliketh, perhaps because he has been marked as a traitor. Tamith is the woman who leads Volcano Manor under the authority of the Lord Rykard, and she admires Rykard. Most likely she's the woman referenced by the Blue Dancer talisman as the woman who helped the swordsman seal away the god of Rot, the blind swordsman possibly being Shabriri. The Cult of Assassination's goal is to hunt individuals and kill them, especially tarnished champions, feeding them to Rykard to increase his size so that he can one day swallow up the gods. They also have snake hybrid offspring, such as the poor girl Rhea, who is horrified to discover that she was born from Rykard. Tamith and Rykard reject the Fingers, the Golden Order, and the Erdtree, refusing to scavenge for crumbs like the Tarnished, or to vie for power like his siblings, even if it means heresy. There's a warrior from the Roundtable who lost a woman close to him to the cult, but in the end finds himself too weak to exact revenge, joining them instead. Tamith visits the head of the slain Rykard and begins to feast on his remains as to continue the cycle of cannibalism.
I wish to be your serpent. One day, let us.
The Dung Eater is a mass murderer who kills indiscriminately and defiles corpses with his dung, then eats part of their flesh so that he can continue his cycle. He's a grotesque monster that wishes to spread an everlasting curse on humanity, their children, and their children's children. Truly one of the most horrifying characters in the game. I kind of like the Dung Eater. I think he views humanity to be corrupted, similar to the way the Three Fingers seem to view things by administering the frenzy. And it's no coincidence both can be found under the capital behind bars. We first learn about him when Roderika points out the accursed smell and sounds coming from an isolated room in the Roundtable. By feeding his seedbed curses back to the Dung Eater, similar to feeding Deathroot to the beast, we seem to empower the loathsome creature, giving him an overdose of his own medicine, which leads to his demise. He then furnishes the Fell Rune, what he calls the Cursed Blessing. His idea is to spread the curse until it coalesces into a cursed ring to defy order. The Fell Rune says that by defiling order, defilement is no more, and the curse becomes a blessing. It's similar in thought to the Frenzied Flame, rejecting the old order and resetting the world to zero, something anew. Using his rune sets up the Blessing of Despair. Finally, this leads us to the Frenzied Flame, an ending that, along with Ranni's, I consider to be the ending that best suits the lands between, perhaps the ending the writers intended for us to go on. Below Leyndell, the royal capital, lies a door with the curse mark of flames, and behind the door are the Three Fingers. These Three Fingers have obviously been locked away for going against the greater will, and luring Tarnished down a different variation of becoming Lord. One that saves maidens but can destroy the world, including the Fingers themselves. The power of the frenzy seems to inhabit those that are blind, visually impaired, so that they can see what no one else can see. This tends to affect maidens, with Irina being one such girl, who also bears a resemblance to another blind girl, Hieta, who wishes to find Shabriri grapes to be guided to the Fingers in order to be a maiden. Of course, the Three Fingers reject maidens, as they would become the sacrifice. Yura Shabriri, the narrator. Yura is a hunter of bloody fingers. When you kill him at the end of his quest, his body becomes the vessel for Shabriri, the most hated man in history. His eyes were taken from him after he committed slander, most likely by denouncing the word of the Two Fingers in the Erdtree. He is closely connected to the Frenzied Flame, being one of the first people to be seduced by the flame. When you meet him, he cautions you against setting the maiden ablaze, as many have sacrificed maidens before in order to claim the throne. Tarnished Vike, former fellow of the Roundtable, being one such example. He implores you to set the world in the chaos, and though he might sound like a madman, he has a perspective that lines up with the discoveries that Sir Gideon, the Goldmask, and others have made, that the current order is not a good thing. The frenzy offers an end to the cycle, albeit one that threatens to end the whole world completely. I have a wild theory that Shabriri is the narrator at the beginning and ending of the game. Why? Because the narrator declares himself to be a tarnished from the lands between, clearly an old wise man that has been around long enough to know things. And to a blind man like Shabriri, what else can you do but tell the story? He's the closest NPC that sounds similar to the narrator, and in the original Elden Lord ending, the Age of Fracture is mentioned, which is also what the three fingers relay to Hieta at the end of her quest. She transcribes the word of the three fingers, saying the greater will made the mistake of allowing suffering into the world, and so what was borrowed should be returned. Specifically, she refers to it as a fracture, which happens to be what the narrator refers to at the Age of Fracture, should you become a regular Elden Lord. Is this referencing the fracture of the ring, or something else? Melina, wanting to sacrifice herself as other maidens have tried, is acting unnaturally, as she isn't a true maiden of the fingers. It would seem to be a pointless sacrifice in the end for the other maidens who failed, still to place a tarnished upon the throne. At the final end of the game, the reason you fight Radagon instead of Marika is because it is Radagon's will to repair the ring, whereas it was Marika's will to destroy it. He gives you that "here's looking at you" stare, which could mean, do you really want this? Or perhaps he's glad you've come to free him from his eternal prison. Marika's hammer that shattered the ring is of course raised to strike you down, the carrier of the great runes, as the final obstacle to the Elden Beast, one of the true gods of the greater will. What you do as Elden Lord is up to you. Well, this video is my effort to make, as Patches would say, the nonsense less nonsensical. If you have anything to add, such as corrections or theories of your own, please feel free to add them in the comments and contribute to the discussion on this game. Thank you for watching. I put a lot of work into this. If you're watching to this point in the video, please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting and all that stuff, so you can see my future videos of this kind. Elden Ring is an awesome game.